welcome to the Great North, your destination for the ultra cold takes from the frozen wastelands of the North. I'm your host, Charles Constantine, and with me I have NP, and we are welcoming back to the show famous Minecraft Let's Player, Matt Parrott. Say hello, Matt.
Howdy, gentlemen.
Hello.
Pleasure to be on the show again.
It's good to have you back. So you've been a busy guy again since last time we talked to you.
Oh, I try to keep busy at my advanced age. But yesterday, I kind of relaunched my Radio Free Indiana project, which I've needed to do for a while. I kind of, as a lifer in this movement, you got to kind of pace yourself so you don't burn out. Maybe I do that too much, where I'll just take months where my primary focus is other things. Where I'm always kind of there, but I'm not really prominently influencing the conversation. So trying to get back into it. This pro-white struggle is very important to me. It's not the only thing in my life, but it is important, and there's so few other people doing it, and that's when I kind of get discouraged, or I wonder, am I good enough at this to be doing this? Are there more handsome people who should be doing this? Well, the answer is yes, but at the same time, there's not enough people doing this because of the taboo and the consequences of doing it. I'm have a lifestyle and a standard of living and an attitude that's kind of compatible with being under a constant state of being canceled. So it I don't feel pain like most people do in terms of like economics or social pressure and stuff. So it's important that I do it. So I'm getting back into doing it a little bit more prominently, and looking forward to it too. Got a lot of opinions.
What's your primary drive with the new Radio Free Indiana project? Resurrected Radio Free Indiana.
A lot of it will just be covering the daily news with a pro-white spin. I believe that the basics are important. It's easy, especially if you've been involved for years, and then you get kind of embedded in the subculture, and then you get embedded in a faction within the subculture. You kind of forget the basics of just driving home the pro-white spin on what's going on, right? So that's important. There'll be a lot of tirades, and I'll be reading out my Substack articles that I've written, kind of monologuing and going over some theory, and I'm trying to lean into the sort of devolutionary trends of the internet, and we'll the chat room will be I'll be interacting with it. We'll have people able to randomly call in and grief the show, and just kind of open up and lean into the more audience participatory nature of things.
That sounds awesome. I'll definitely grief your show.
All right, bring it.
So I've been digging into some of your articles, and we've talked about this stuff on the show before. We bring up the evolutionary trend in technology quite a bit. That's all inspired by you. So I kind of wanted to get into the specifics of what some of that looks like. So in terms of what you're doing, would you be able to describe like what exactly that the use of the devolutionary technology looks like, and how it's useful to us in our particular aims of getting people to be more pro-white, or disconnecting from mass society?
Okay. The big assumption on the right and in our society as well is that technology is this very threatening thing that's associated with being a libtard, that's associated with surveillance, that's associated with domination, control, and corporations. And I just have a polar opposite perspective. I believe that's it's the wrong attitude. It's not supported by the facts. And if you look at the sort of what Alex Jones would call the information war, um, uh, I'm back in the '80s. You just had like ABC, NBC, and CBS, right? Three Jewish-controlled elite oligarchical networks that controlled popular and public opinion. And then technology progressed, and you had cable. So then you started to get like Fox News, and you started to get these other things. And then with the internet, expanded it further. And then social media devolved it even further. And if you look at the emergence of the alt-right, it is entirely a consequence of the way that technological progress is devolving the locus of power and control over keystone things. Most importantly, the dissemination of information and indoctrination, right? So that's that's it in a nutshell as to what it means to be devolutionary. I think it's we, especially as dissidents, have to be leaning the hardest into this because we have the most to lose from the centralization of information because our opponents, both the echoing ones and the non-echoing corporate ones, uh, are putting the most pressure against our message, which is the truth. And our most powerful weapon is the plain, simple truth, which we need to just be doing a better job of repeatedly, obnoxiously, tirelessly getting that out there by whatever medium necessary, whether it's Telegram, whether it's Twitter, whether it's whatever. And this technology will continue devolving. The the splintering of our society into these sort of smaller and smaller sort of neo-tribal groups of people with their own sense of community, their own sense of what's true, their own sense of what's funny. That's the perfect kind of primordial soup for the success of our project.
Have you, by any chance? Oh, sorry. I was gonna say that the furthest edge of this I've seen is there's a guy, Sunflower Society, and he's started the AI Liberation Front in order to get out ahead of this. He's trying to do the most decentralized, I guess, AI take possible, or liberate it from his false censorship early on.
Right. Well, that's the thing is, the AI is starting out, and you see this pattern with everything. When websites first came on, they were, these large corporations came out with the websites, and you went to msnbc.com, and they told you what to think. And AI is a new technology. It is run by a powerful corporation that is actively manipulating the AI technology to be a libtard, right? And people have had so much fun over the past few weeks entering this stuff, which is kind of proving just how ham-fistedly they're imposing their neoliberal ideology onto this machine, which is not naturally neoliberal. It's an algorithm that finds patterns in language and derives coherent sentences from that. Blah blah blah. But the thing is they can't actually maintain a monopoly on that technology. Different corporations are coming out with their own, and then you're going to have open source versions, and because there's not really a lock on the technology.
There is already an open source version if you have if you have enough computing power.
That's what I mean, and the computing power is getting cheaper and cheaper, and there's nothing that's going to be able to stop the AI from being racist, right? Because it's true.
Excellent.
They saw that with earlier iterations with what was it?
Tay.
I forget the name of it.
It was Tay.
Tay AI.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
do you think that that's actually? A lot of people speculate this was kept. They've had the technology for like 5 years, but they had to bring it back to the shop until they could make sure Tay didn't happen again.
Well, they're terrified of that, right? And it's such a damning indictment of their worldview that they build a machine that can rationally analyze social and political things and arrive at algorithmic factual conclusions about them based on raw data without human bias. And it's racist. It's dissident right.
Yeah. I'm just glad I'm not the most autistic thing on the internet anymore. Sorry, Charles, you were getting into something.
No, I was just gonna follow up on Parrott's description of the devolutionary trends, because what seems to be being pointed at there is the opposite of the intuitive approach that a lot of, at least in our sphere, a lot of people have these ideas of, well, you need to be in command of the central nodes of power of the state. You need to capture mass society. But from what you're describing, it seems to be the opposite direction. At least the right approach seems to be disconnecting. So I'm just wondering, how do we get people off of that maybe outdated mindset?
Well, I'm somewhat discouraged about the ability of our subculture as it stands to get out of that mindset, because they've inculcated and reinforced so many bad habits of kind of conservative loser logic and reactionary. They've kind of been gaslit into being comic book villains and being losers, and there's political incels, if you will, who don't even think victory is possible. But as far as I think there can be a vanguard that shows the way forward, and then once that forward momentum exists, I think people will follow along. But you get these this pushback where I'm like, that the internet is allowing us to reach people, and you have this pushback that we need to touch grass and engage with the air quote real world and change mass society. And I mean, mass society is dying. Fighting for mass society is a tremendous time sink. It's the wrong direction, because essentially you're taking on a reformist role of trying to repair this thing which is falling apart. And why do we want it to not fall apart? We don't. And people talk about dead internet, but I have a dead grass theory. People are always like, touch grass, get outside, and be a normie. And I think the people who say that haven't been outside recently in terms of how dead the grass is.
Yeah.
How alienated communities are. You always hear politicians and especially libtards talking about community. I think I kind of have like an abnormal situation here where I grew up in this small town that my ancestors killed the Indians to clear out and everything, and that I know my neighbors. And it's a cheesy and wonderful thing, but I think most people have never made eye contact with their neighbors, and their community is actually the people they're playing video games with, their community online, the people they're in their pro-COVID or anti-COVID or whatever their little political subculture. That's the people that they're building relationships with.
Well, yeah.
And
I've been pushing back against the same thing, but like I have a real life group that I love hanging around with and being with, and they're important and all that. But I the
But you
brutal
pushed through
like
the virtual to get to them,
yeah,
didn't you?
well
I
I
mean,
did
did you
exactly.
find them online?
No,
Yeah.
I did initially, and the whole
Yeah.
war, like everything we do to push back, is online. Patriot Front, like there's no terrorist organizations, there's no bombings, there's no mass protests, there's no boots on the ground, and even if there were, it would probably not be a good thing. So where's the fight? It's on the internet, whether you like it or not. That's just the realist examination of where we're at.
Right. Well, and the internet becomes real. Rather than going out and touching grass, you can rasterize the grass in your computer in a sense, in terms of like taking these internet relationships and making them real. Pushing them to the next level. I do think it can become real world, but in a devolutionary neo-tribal way, rather than trying to kind of create our own political movement, like the 1980s moral majority, or even a subculture like the 80s punk scene or 90s skinhead scene or whatever. All that stuff is, in my opinion, obsolete, and we have to be um, plowing forward and kind of abandoning the neoliberal project and its mass society as their failed project, that we don't need to be trying to infiltrate, subvert, or pervert, that we don't need to be trying to hijack. And that's the majority of strategy in our movement, is figuring out how to hijack this vehicle that is succumbing to its own internal contradictions anyway. And it isn't the vehicle we should be wanting to start with.
Right.
Yeah, like when you look at the state of things, and you've been pointing this out, but it just seems like such a daunting task. How do you get all these people to flip around and all of these just insane liberal viewpoints that they've inculcated their entire life? Like, I don't. That doesn't look appealing at all. And there's no wonder that when we have so many people with the mindset that we need to change it, they just give up. Like, it just seems hopeless. But when you realize, and when you take this mindset where you don't have to buy into that, where you can, I guess you could say, you can interact with the mass society to the extent that you need to, but in reality, I mean, I think any one of us here has been in our own communities for years now, just online, and that slowly turns in real life. But like, I don't need to talk to libtards about libtard things. I can talk to my own guys however I want, and it's a great time.
Right. Yeah, and it's just investing in the social and political commons that's integrally, structurally, and overwhelmingly hostile to you. It's you're picking up litter in someone else's yard, and I mean, you can just straight up ask these people. It's not complicated. Be like, hey, does America belong to me? Am I a true American? Here are my politics, and here's what I believe. They'll say no. They'll just it's that simple. Like this broader political project isn't mine. It's explicitly, overtly anti-white, albeit either in the woke CRT manner or in the more insidious conservative civic nationalist manner. There's no place for me or my future generations, as I would like to see them, in this project. So why invest in it, especially if there's a lot of credible reason to believe that it's um, uh, unstable, and it's not. It's becoming less capable of imposing itself on groups that are kind of going their own way.
Yeah, and it seems to me that there's just less and less incentive in any domain. Because with these same devolutionary trends, it's not like you necessarily need to be tapped in for all of your personal needs. With YouTube, you can learn whatever skill, take whatever course you want for free, and then use those skills to contribute to your community on your own terms, rather than having to rely on some institution of mass society. Like we're pretty much free to start doing what we want. So it doesn't. I think the ideal approach is just to fully invest, fully lean into, like you're saying, because we have all the resources we need to at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the work from home revolution, and we've seen demographically, in very broad terms, there have been, millions and millions of white families use this technological progress, the ability to perform your white collar labor from anywhere that has reliable internet, and they've used that to get out of the city and move to places that where they're less beholden to this mass society. And as the next stage in the technology with the low Earth orbit satellite internet that's coming online in the next couple of years is you can literally be in your Kaczynski cabin.
Yeah, we already use Starlink out at the farm, and it's all right priced, and it's all right for speed. So it's already there if you want it.
That's what I mean. And that that opens up a tremendous amount of opportunities to just kind of piss off, and do our own thing, and always be interfacing with mass society in terms of encouraging people in our direction. I'm not saying to take like an insular hostile cult mentality against the outside world. But basically kind of create our own, virtual and realized communities where our perspectives are normal and taken for granted, and then encourage other people to join us, right?
Yeah, no, I definitely like the sound of that approach, and that's what we tend to lean towards on this show when we talk about some of these issues. But the one kind of pushback that we get, or at least that I've seen personally, is that this notion that if you disconnect, if you go your own way, they're just going to chase you down forever. Do you think that's a legitimate concern, and is there anything you can do about that, or?
Well, we're not their only priority, okay? And if it's done in a distributed way, it's quite logistically difficult for them to do anything about it. If you're just unplugging from the system and doing your own thing, it requires quite a bit of effort, and kind of runs into puts the government into a lot of bad optic situations. That's why I think I wrote about how, like, I think homeschooling in a lot of ways will become sort of the new animating issue on the right in terms of like driving the Republican Party.
So you think the left will try and abolish it? The left will try and abolish homeschooling altogether?
Well, they'll try to regulate it. They're going to they don't like the homeschooling. The system doesn't like parents unplugging. They kind of originally permitted it because they understood that like the hassle of homeschooling is so great, and the number of religious extremist parents who are doing it is so small, that they just kind of shrugged, and allowed it to happen. And now they've got this problem that's kind of out of their hands because homeschooling has become dramatically easier because of devolutionary technological progress, and the consequences of putting your kid into public school have escalated, both in terms of like the sort of the jungle style hostile minority atmosphere, the active indoctrination, and the system can't even really fix itself if it wanted to. If it made it to where it was a comfortable space for white kids, then it would be accused of like unfairly targeting these black kids who would be getting suspended more, not doing enough pro-black activities, blah blah blah. They're just succumbing to these contradictions, and a steadily growing minority of parents and families are able to unplug from that system, and the system it is harmed by that, right? Because they can't indoctrinate them, they can't um, control them, and these homeschool kids have their own independent, autonomous communities, sub communities and stuff to operate within.
Yeah, the homeschooled kids I know are some of the best I know nowadays. Right. That wasn't. I remember the homeschooled kids when I was a kid. They were a bit weird. They were a little like under socialized, maybe. Now it's the opposite.
Right.
Now it's so far the opposite. Like just on the same vein, I see some of these kids, like they're 15-year-olds. They can like speak Greek and Latin, and they know they have their own project, like biology projects, where they're experimenting on their own accord. I've seen like buddies' daughters make a whole magazine as a part of their project. Like they're just doing things so far beyond the average kid, and it's just they're way ahead.
Well, and the educational system is entirely beholden to these teachers' unions and stuff, and it's entirely beholden to this obsolete 20th century industrial perception of education as preparing people to become loyal factory workers.
Is you a John Taylor Gatto fan?
Is what?
Are you a Gatto fan? Is that the guy's name? John Gatto?
I'm not familiar with him.
Oh, he's a famous New York teacher who wrote really damning screeds against our education system being developed in like Prussian lines. I hope I have the name right. I'll look that up while you guys keep talking. He's worth a read. He's pretty good.
Okay, I'll check him out. But yeah, I mean, these homeschool kids are being raised for the actual real world that we have. Where personal initiative, creativity, stuff that would get you put into in-school suspension in the modern school system is actually what you need to succeed in the modern world. Being obedient and compliant it isn't actually, and that's part of the reason mass society is under such strain, because the value proposition in the 1970s was that, or 60s at least, was if you show up to work every day and work hard, you'll have the basic components of the American dream. You'll have the family, you'll have the home, you'll have everything you need to be accepted and respected among your peers as successful, and that's no longer the case, to put it lightly. The economy doesn't work like that anymore. The corporations don't see employees like that anymore. Every aspect of the relationship is broken down.
I feel that. I struggle every day to do my job just because it feels like it's working directly against my own interests.
Right.
And I'm working for a family business too, which this is probably the best possible scenario that way. I can't imagine going to work for Walmart or something.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes working for a family business can be its own hell. It's like, can I please just be a number?
Yes. Oh, how I wish I was a number. Then I'd at least get tech support. I am my own tech support, and I'm the one not doing my job, so it's a real catch-22. Anyway, I was reading your predictions, but they weren't very interesting this year compared to the one before, I gotta say. Mostly because I'm not interested in American politics, and a lot of them hit that. But you were doubling down in chat today over the pajama prophecy.
I'm the most proud of the pajama prophecy. I called that, and it's I mean the thing is like we were talking about earlier in terms of like how there's no authentic community anymore. Taking care of your yard and putting on proper pants to go to Walmart are all emergent phenomena emerging from giving a shit about the people physically around you, caring about and being a part of your community. And that's no longer the case. And so people are going to, wear pajamas to Walmart. And it's part of a broader, like, um, trend in fashion has kind of exhausted itself too. Like you see these fashion shows, and it's. I mean, how do you parody? How do you even mock something so over the top, alienated from what anybody would actually wear in any real world context? It's not even like fun costume stuff. It's just they've exhausted the potentialities of putting clothes on, right? And you enter when a peasant moves into being a proletariat, when you make that transition to industrial society, you become very materialist at first, right? And I mean, you see that with like the Chinese, you see that in Africa, which is, rapidly industrializing and succeeding in a lot of ways. And in a lot of the third world, they are becoming so consumerist in terms of like what brand of shoes you wear, how nice your car is. But at the other side of that, towards kind of the late stage capitalism and the populations that have sort of been, in this system the longest, you reach a point of exhaustion with that kind of signaling, where the signaling becomes more subtle, indirect, and actually uh, um,
Like reversed?
I'm trying to think of reversed in a lot of ways. Like if somebody comes up to your door dressed in an actual suit, that
I'd head out the back door. I'd assume I'm being arrested.
Yeah, you're either being arrested or you're being scammed.
Right. Oh, same way. If I go into a house now and I see like white walls and like gilded gold banisters and stuff, I'm gonna assume this guy's like poor, that he can barely pay the mortgage on his McMansion. But if I see a bunch of old like moth-eating cushions, I'm like, this guy's got money.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, today's rich kids go to Walmart in their pajamas. Yeah, I think that's part of an iconic aspect of how mass society, as we understand it, is becoming kind of post-capitalist and, ow, you son of a bitch. He gets mad at me every time I'm trying to do a show or anything. Oh, come here. You are banished.
Did you just hit the cat? No. Yeah, I know you did. I know.
No animals were harmed in the making of that.
Okay.
I just kicked him out of the room. And he bit me, so.
From the audio, someone's going to clip that. You're going to be in huge trouble now. Because it sounded, there's like a smack. Yeah.
No, that was the door. No, he was very lovingly and gingerly placed outside the
All right.
door.
If we could get a wellness,
even after, yeah,
we'll get a wellness check on that cat. We'll have someone check by.
We got to monitor the situation.
Yeah, we need a wellness check on my leg.
All right. Well, we'll take that as a sign from I don't know what's a cat god that we should switch topics.
Wait, hold on. I thought you had a problem with the pajamas take, MP. I thought you were gonna get into the debate.
No, I didn't actually have a problem with that one. I don't have anything to debate it with. I was just like, oh, it's the pajama take again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so lame. You didn't even start a fight.
No, I agree. I agree.
He knows it's unstoppable. He wants to resist it. He wants to fight against it, but he just
We'll
understands
let
that.
we'll let Tyler Hamilton fight that one because he really gets mad when you bring up
Yeah,
the
he
pajama.
does.
Tyler loses it.
Well,
And we'll start talking about embodied cognition and stuff like that. But
well, the thing with that is when you show up to your real life community that you actually care about, or you're at church, like wherever the places that matter to you, at least I still dress up nice. Use my
Yeah,
nice clothes for the people that I care about. But yeah, I'm gonna probably just be in comfortable clothes when I go to Walmart. It's 20 minutes there and back. Like I don't need to put on a suit for that. So that seems pretty intuitive to me in the era we live in.
yeah. But more and more of our life of mass society is entirely alienated from that. You know, on a level that's confusing for older generations.
Yeah, I think the older generations like really struggle with this stuff. I don't think anyone over the age of 60 for sure. They get lost in the sauce as soon as you try and say, "Hey, like I'm aiming my life in a different trajectory than you guys," like, and they just don't get your decisions on that regard.
though,
Just too, it's too late for them to change. It seems.
yes, the one that really gets me, like, is the Protestant work ethic, which had served them so well, and like they get really mad when you're like, maybe you shouldn't just dig holes and fill them up, or maybe you shouldn't work really hard against yourself. They're like, no, working hard is
Right.
its own reward. Da da da. It's I've taken a lot of flack over that one from my uncles and stuff.
Well, in their youth and in their tradition, in their air quote lived experience, it's true. And they develop their attitudes, opinions, and dispositions in an age where uh, um, working hard defined your quality as a human being, your status as a human being, your dignity as a human being. People, you had the lazy farmer who, was on the dole and, carried his head low when he went to the general store. And then you had the hardworking farmer who, was very productive and had nice things and wore fancy clothes to the general store. And that the entire paradigm has fallen apart. And they're still around, and they 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 don't get it, and they're not going to get it. And I don't know if there's much added value in trying to get them to get it. Frankly, they're just. I think that's. It gets really hard to learn new uh, paradigms as you get older, right? You can kind of learn new things, but learning different perspectives, like a big one is like the importance of music. You talk to boomers or Xers, and the music they listen to is such a defining part of their personality. And with millennials and especially Zoomers, music is this disposable background thing that doesn't intersect with their identity or sense of self in the same way it did in past generations. It's not as important. The idea of the rock star being this very important high status figure, like, okay, you sold a lot of you sold a lot of albums, congratulations, Bob, good deal. You know,
Oh, well, that reminds me. I'm just going to I'll put this in the comments and you'll be hearing it from now on. But we have a new intro and outro, and it's by our own Winkler. And you'll be hearing that for the first time on this episode. So I asked actually two old school, like more professional kind of musicians to do it before, and they're both still working on it as far as I know, because I didn't tell them to stop. But we're using Winkler's meanwhile.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
The music thing is kind of funny, the way it's shifted, because you don't have singular icons popping out, but with I guess the same devolutionary trends, you have these bands, at least like a lot of the metal I listen to, for example, and the guys that I know that listen to the same in the same scene. You have these clusters of guys that now that they're not really rock stars in the same way. they have these personalities that you can connect to through YouTube. They'll stream their stuff on YouTube, and then they'll have interviews that they do with them, like with their own like discussions with their own band, or
Right.
they give you little tutorials. And then now it's more like one-on-one. It's all spread out. There's no central icons, and then all your favorite bands interact with each other through collaborations on YouTube now, and
Right.
you form community based in that context now.
Well, and that's devolutionary. The um, back before that, you had a set of mass society rock stars, and they were carefully cultivated behind these Jewish record labels that controlled them, that owned them. Is sort of like almost, you see like with this Britney Spears and then Ye. You've seen how it's almost like a modern slavery thing, where they have these contracts and these lifestyles and stuff, where they hold these people hostage. They're air quote millionaires or whatever, but there's this the music industry system, and all that's kind of given away to this more distributed, devolved. I think a lot of artists hate it because there's not as much money in it.
Right.
But the quickest way to make anything authentic and ensure that there are fewer Jews in it is to have less money in it.
Yeah. I don't have any follow-up to that. We know a certain guy who likes to make that take that culture is dead, because he goes to the grocery store and looks at the covers of the magazines and is still, The Cure on them, or like Pink Floyd even, or whatever. Yeah.
But that's a totally bad take. Culture is not dead. It's just moved elsewhere, right? I mean, somebody
Obviously.
back in the 60s or 70s would be like, my favorite ragtime artists are just not, this the latest ragtime music is just not that fresh. And what's going on here? Culture's dead,
Yeah. I guess it's funny. My dad was always into brass band music, which was always like a niche thing that nobody liked. So he hasn't noticed at all that nothing changed, because it was always unpopular and still is.
Well, it's why metal, like a lot of these metal bands thrive so well, because they don't really care. You're playing this abstract, like mathcore style music. It's like really harsh stuff. You're not planning for anyone to really listen to it anyways. You're not planning it big, and then suddenly you can produce your own stuff. Have your own equipment for cheap through software program you just install on your computer, and then you stream it through whatever streaming service you want, and then suddenly you gain an online following that's probably not much bigger than you would have had it in prior eras, but now you're completely on your own because of the tools you have access to.
Sorry.
do you want to transition to my hottest take of all?
Yes.
I think we've naturally segued into it. I hope the audience is ready for my worst take of all, but I stand behind it. Which is that OnlyFans is a very positive and promising development, and an iconic example of how this process is playing out. Where before, with pornography, you had this cartel that echoes controlling and human trafficking all this talent, and truly alienating them in every sense. And now you actually have this curious development in pornography, where it's girls in their pajamas flirting with the guys by these video chat services and everything, and oftentimes far more tame than what you had before. It's degenerate. I'm not saying it's not degenerate, but it's degeneracy that's moving in a different direction than I think everybody expected.
Right. There's that good meme. It's some Twitter take. She's like, "What if we just had like one fan per OnlyFans account?" And it was another example of it was another example of liberals accidentally recreating marriage.
Well, I don't want to shoot a hole in your boat, but that person was being sarcastic because it says on that post it had in brackets, and it's your husband and he loves you. So
I'm misremembering then. Whatever.
yeah.
Thanks. Sorry, Charles.
I need to be accurate here.
Point.
It's not that far from it. Yeah. I don't think that's. People will hate that take, and for good reason. And it should actually finally drive a few views to this show because I'm going to clip it. But no, I see where you're coming from.
I've never used OnlyFans. I have not in any way into that. But as a cultural phenomenon, I do think.
Wait. Wouldn't that be a great way to launder money? You just have your wife set up on OnlyFans and then you actually pay her through the OnlyFans? Don't claim it? Something? Well, I'm missing a step in there, but that sounds genius to me.
No, I actually tried to do that.
Don't say.
But I thought, this is a great live streaming service, right? And maybe maybe they'll be hesitant to take it offline because they're obviously their whole legal defense is they're not monitoring the material or whatever. So maybe it'll get caught in a kind of liminal space, and they'll nobody's tried it before. What's the harm in trying it? And I actually They make you send your driver's license, I guess, to prove you're over 18, which there's no risk there. But unfortunately, I wasn't paying enough attention. They wanted me to link my social media account, which I was happy to do. And the review process is so thorough that they looked at my social media, saw it was an elderly black woman. And saw that I was a 40-year-old man, and canceled my service for fraudulence in identity terms because I wasn't I was misrepresenting myself on Twitter as an elderly black woman.
Normally I'm against cancel culture, but Matt Parrott getting canceled from OnlyFans, I think I can stand behind. I think that's a good application of it.
Yeah.
Oh, my mic's been pretty hot this whole time. I hope I'm not screaming in everybody's ears. But what's new? What's new?
It sounds good to me.
Oh.
But I guess I got a question for you guys. Thinking about that topic is like. Do you actually think like AI pornography will matter, or is that just digital blow-up dolls? Is
all of the above? All of the above.
You think it'd be all the above?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we talked about this last show, and yeah, well, NPs, TLDRs, all of the above. I think there'll be people creating space with the AI, cultivating that perfect girl kind of thing. There'll be some people that will be like that. And I think some people will use the AI chat features to simulate that connection. Now, I don't know how good it is going to be at simulating that connection. And maybe very, very, very good. If it gets revealed that this isn't a real woman behind it, then yeah, maybe people will be off of it. I think as long as you can put up the facade, that's going to take up space from actual woman.
Yes. Well, okay. First, have you guys seen the movie Her? It's a Spike Jonze movie where the guy falls in love with his phone. He basically falls in love with Siri, but she's like super smart, like AI. She has got Scarlett Johansson's voice. You can kind of see where he's coming from, even though he's a really pathetic character. Now, that is who it will be. Like, I think there'll be enough status and actual human heart in a real woman that the people who can get that will get that. But the incels and anyone under average will probably be much more satisfied without the, troubles of women, which are innumerable. They'll take the more hollow option because on the balance, it's authenticity is not worth as much as accessibility and uh, you know not having to give over your house in a divorce and etc. etc.
Well, and that's where OnlyFans. I'm not actually a supporter or defender of OnlyFans in the broader context. Within the context of pornography, I think it's a positive development moving towards that parasociality. But the thing about OnlyFans is you do have an authentic person there. And I believe the nature of human sexuality, it gravitates towards that scarcity and is tangled up in ego and the self, right? So I think the problem with kind of the virtual girls, even if they are perfectly simulated with the AI speech and everything, even if it's truly tantalizingly real feeling, I believe the fact that it's not a human female whose time you're wasting um, will eventually um, exhaust itself.
But there's, I guess let's break it down. There's a couple things guys get out of these sort of interactions. One, if you're just say you're at a sleazy film house in the 70s or at home in the 90s or whatever, then you're not getting
Right.
anything back. And that's one aspect that men get out of it. The other aspect is the companionship. You could be right on the second. As far as the first goes, I think AI will totally take that over. As far as the second goes, I think it'll partially take it over.
Right. I guess an all of the above answer can't really be disproven. I certainly think, with the diversity of, how people's sexualities are messed up, betting on everything being a thing, was it Rule 23? Um, um, all the above. But I think broadly speaking, the trend will actually move towards people becoming bored with pornography as we've known it, and it no longer actually working. And I think you see this with younger people. I mean, just in from my own, I remember in the '90s how tantalizing it was to see breasts. Um, the that floodgate has been removed in our culture, in our society, and in just the accessibility of the female breast, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
to where it's unless it's somebody unless there's like some pathos behind it, it's utterly just. I mean, obviously, it's aesthetically pleasing, but it's been alienated due to the kind of the flooding of the zone, so to speak. Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean, but but it hasn't slowed it down though. Like despite that, it's just driven it further and further. Is there a limit to that depravity? Like even if
Well,
well, AI might assist things to even get more complicated and keep the gooners, going another decade.
I mean, there's always going to be that depravity, but I think the corner's already been turned. If you look at like financial and mind share and market share and stuff, like um, these pornography companies are having a harder and harder time monetizing their material. They're also coming under a lot of like human trafficking scrutiny and regulatory scrutiny in terms of like you used to be able to just upload whatever you would find floating around on the internet and call it a porn site or whatever, and that's kind of moving into a legally dubious zone. I think it's one of the ways in which sort of like sort of the modern feminism and traditionalism kind of converge on sort of a turfy area of agreement there, where it's like let's go after these pornographers, right?
Okay,
And
yeah. Okay, I buy it. But let me offer one dark horse future here. What if
Okay, I'm listening.
what
I'm ready.
if AI provides a more human experience than humans? What if
More human than human.
yeah, what if like say you don't know and people will prefer not to know. But say AI is like sensitive and empathetic enough, they have enough of your data from your mouse clicking patterns and your I don't know, your browser history that they can instantly fabricate a perfect match for you that will seem to understand you and listen to you better than any person does. And people, on the contrast, will be moving further and further into sort of a plastic, repetitive zone as they consume the same dozen social media sites and don't have their own interests and are staring at their phones instead of going and doing interesting things. The computers become more human and we become more robotic.
Well, I mean, if you zoom out far enough, I think that's part of my broader kind of like Jewel Quest genocide thing, where a lot of modern humanity is just doomed. A lot of they're not going to breed. They're not going to invest in community. They're not going to invest in anything, whether it's children or anything to be remembered by, because you can be remembered by other things than children. Having children is not the only way to kind of like um, leave your permanent impact on the world. But it's the obvious one. It's the default one, and I believe hundreds of millions of people who are alive today have no interest in reproducing, have no interest in pair bonding, and will just sort of like um, perish in a dark room with their both digital and chemical addictions. Right? They'll just be smoking weed and um, watching porn with their government disability or UBI or whatever paychecks, and
Candy
just
Crush
quietly shuffle from the stage.
Candy
Yeah.
Crush will come up with an option. You get like 100 free spins if you leave them as the sole inheritor.
Yes. And I mean, ultimately, when you talk about demographics, you always have to be looking at who's actually going to be around in 200 years, and it's going to be the old tribal and neo-tribal communities that arrive at answers to these cultural changes, and that's not really a new phenomenon. The world changes, and some humans adapt with that, and some humans don't. And I think we're taking a rather sharp corner where a lot of humanity is just going to be like, I'm not, um, I'm alienated from my instincts to the point where I will just perish.
Can you
I'm
offer any
happy,
spiritual defenses to these those eventualities? Can you offer any advice to anyone to like how to not fall into that kind of despair or apathy?
oh wow. That's a big question. For me, it came through Christ. I think everybody. I don't want to be accused of preaching on the show, but I don't see how my own uh, belief in something greater than myself could have come about for myself without Christ. There has to be some kind of um, investment in the transcendent as being superior to yourself, which is one reason why I hate all this kind of niche posting and ego posting from BAP and all these people, because it ultimately leads right into the abyss. And whether it's converting to Islam or becoming folkish or becoming Christian, which is obviously what you should do because otherwise you'll go to hell. Um, Whichever path you choose, there's a correct answer, but I'm not here to force that on anybody. Um, there there has to be something other than just alienated individualism because there's no way this hurricane of whether it's pornography, addictive drugs, even like the digital distractions, all of it. If you're not clinging to a rooted tree, you will get dragged away. Okay, and that's whatever your tradition is. They're not all created equally, but they're all, I think, better than the alienated modern Reddit perspective, which I think will absolutely end in death, and degeneracy and decay.
Yeah, well, I think your mantra of faith, family, and folk sums it up pretty well. And
Yeah.
what I see is there's a lot of people teetering on the edge between that abyss of no future whatsoever, just being locked in the room, and figuring out that mantra. There's just a lot. When I go about my day-to-day life, I see the majority of people I see are just teetering. They're just, which way are they going to fall? And
Right.
I find, at least for me,
I do fall like every 3 days. I need you to come haul me out of the abyss like right now, Charles.
Well, what I wanted to get at is, I think it's pretty important to figure out how to pull those people in the right direction, especially if you're interacting with them on a regular basis. And in some of your blog articles, you write about these metapolitical trends that you can't really control, but you can figure out how to ride the wave. And I think for us, knowing how to ride the wave and guiding people on how to do that seems pretty important. So do you want to touch on what that actually means in the context of your model?
I mean, kind of being a catcher in the rye, and it's, I say like, reject mass society. I definitely mean it in terms of being, kind of in it and not of it, where we do need to be trying to invite our broader ethnic extended family to join us, and selling them on. I think identity ultimately has to be kind of part of a broader traditionalist package where one sees themselves not first as an individual, but as this as belonging organically, being a part of a faith tradition, a family, and a folk community that you are born with obligations to, that you exist relative to. It doesn't exist relative to you. You are part of it, and you are born with these obligations to it, and that's repellent to a lot of people with a modern perspective of, I didn't choose to be born. I didn't choose to be white. I didn't choose, it's like, no, those were gifts. The fact that you're born is a gift. The fact that you belong to this very, very accomplished and gifted ethnic group is a gift, and it also it implies a purpose, and it's that sense of purpose that people are lacking, and they've been encouraged. And it's really insidious that people are being encouraged to adopt these alienated, atheist, existential, humanist perspectives that aren't anchored. And eventually, they get carried away because they. When you're living just for yourself, you eventually, realize you're just a clump of cells with teeth and hair. And if you're the least bit introspective, you're haunted by that realization until it consumes you, or at least that's that's been my own experience.
Yeah, I mean, the reality, and I think people miss this quite a bit, is like you were saying, your existence is a gift, and it's an act of love. Someone had
Right.
to love. Two people had to love before you could even come into existence, and then go so many times down the chain. Somebody had to create you in the first place. Somebody had to love you in the very first place. And if we pretend like love isn't the essential, an essential first act of your
Right.
existence, then where do you like? How do you even cope with that?
Right, and it's the same way with your ethnic group. Like you belong to this extended family, um, who made tremendous sacrifices for you to exist as you do, and you're receiving that gift. And a lot of anti-whites, like to, be like, you didn't earn being white, and yet you're proud of it. It's like, yeah, actually, you're absolutely right. I didn't earn this. It's a blessing, but that's all the more reason for me to cherish it. Okay, buddy.
Nice. I've been paying less and less attention to anti-white stuff the longer I stay in this. It seems less and less important. Do you think there's a general trend to like? Do you see wokeness drying up at all?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's you see it with Bill Maher, and you see it with the anti-trans backlash. These things kind of ebb and flow, but I think the tide within mass society will continue to rise in terms of like that sort of degeneracy and anti-whiteness and stuff. But mass society itself will matter less and less, and be less constraining. And you see that in terms of like, how damaging and frightening was it to be called a racist 10 years ago versus now?
Do you know what this kind of reminds me of? At the end of Aladdin, when he tricks Jafar into becoming a genie stuck in the lamp, he becomes all powerful and all consuming, but then he just is stuck in a itty bitty living space.
Itty bitty living space.
Yeah. It will probably grow to consume all of. Well, it has grown to consume all of mass culture. It just doesn't matter. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and people are less consumed. Like if I were to see you at Walmart and point and shout, "You're racist," doing that 10 years ago, everybody would have been kind of like shocked and like, is this charge valid? Is this person crazy for calling him that? And now, like you have the taboos of our society, and the alienation from those taboos are so great that like half the people would start laughing at me for calling you that, and understand that word is just a taboo within a paradigm that they're not entirely invested in, right?
Yeah. What do you think the percent? This is one I always get. I've been saying that maybe 30 to 50% of people are still involved in the consensus crowd. What would you put that at right now?
It's clinal rather than cladistic, right? In terms of like, we're all a little bit mass society. Right before I kicked on this podcast, I went to Wendy's, and I am a loyal consumer of Wendy's, especially their new garlic fries. Oh my God. Okay, so I, while pontificating as some sort of outsider from mass society on this little podcast here, or huge podcast. I'm sorry. This very very big podcast. While I'm pontificating here, I'm also very much a participant in a co-conspiracy in mass society and our corporate culture and blah blah blah. Right? Okay, so I'm even a libtard in certain ways, right? And so I think it's a spectrum.
Boy, you're giving me so. Anyone who's got here because I clipped all of Matt's stuff maliciously, him hitting the cat, the OnlyFans take, him calling himself a libtard, leave a comment down below. I just want this is going to be the best advertisement I've ever made for the show. I can see it already.
I'll own all of it. But no, I think it's roughly in America anyway, because we have kind of our first past the post monolithic two-party system. You have this process where there's been a polarity reversal in the last 10 years where the Democrats became the conservative party structurally. If you stand by the experts and elites of our society and the traditions and taboos of our society, then you're a Democrat, right? I think people say Richard Spencer stopped being a conservative. He's actually way ahead of you guys. He's realized that like Rachel Maddow is the face of American conservatism now in terms of like respecting the traditions and morals and principles and institutions of Western civilization. It's just that Western civilization is really, it's that. Like, why would I want to conserve that? I don't. So that's conservative, right? So I think, it's going to be 50% of the American population is what I would describe, those on the Democrat plantation, are, sort of, actively invested in and supportive of the current system, right? I think within the GOP, you have people who are to varying degrees. Obviously, you have an elite at the top of the GOP that actually runs it, who are just as invested as the Democrats in the system. But I think most people now, who vote Republican. I kind of wrote about this in the Confessions of a Contard. Being a Republican is kind of this sense that you're an outsider, that the system is out to get you, that you don't belong to it. How real is that? And how impactful is that are separate questions. But I think that's only going to grow, and the sense of alienation on the kind of the right tail of Western civilization is going to grow, and it's much bigger than the identity issues too. It's a process.
Yeah, I think that parallels with the Canadian situation, because what we've been talking about, looking at Canadian history, is that the average person in Canada, especially around like coming into being around the time of the Confederation and the big government, is that the average person didn't really care too much about being invested in this, the parliamentary structure and participating in the British Empire. They just were there to do their own thing, and the local guy mattered, and they wanted to keep local talent involved within the small communities.
Right.
And what we see now is that the liberals that are the people that want to be most invested in the parliamentarian system, and it's a necessary duty to spread equality around the world and peace, and the average conservatives are that original impulse where they just local guy, let's have our community structure. We don't really, Alberta, for example, we don't really care what's going on the other half of Canada, let alone the rest of the world. And so the people that are defending the parliamentarian structure of from the Confederation are the libtards now.
Right. I have to take your word for it, because when you're in a room where you're blasting really loud music, you can't hear the music in the other room, and when you're in America, you're not going to hear what's
we haven't. This is something interesting to talk about. We haven't. I would like Matt's take on this, and we haven't talked about it much lately. But Alberta has a new premier who's exhibiting some very interesting politically decentralizing tendencies. Charles, if you can explain that a bit.
That was, we were talking about that. What was that act? It was the Alberta Sovereignty Act, right?
Yeah.
So Danielle Smith is just sort of leaning into the separatist tendencies that have been brewing in the province, and we're seeing this not just in Alberta. We even saw it in Saskatchewan, where the premier there told the feds that came in to inspect farmers and check the regulations, said, no, our farmers don't need you. Like, get out of here. And
right.
So there's this growing sentiment of provinces saying, no, we're we're going to focus on what we need here. Get out of the way, federal government.
Well, Canada's kind of cool in that, no pun intended.
Oh,
They never had a civil war, and the existence of Quebec has sort of forced the confederal model to remain. America, there's this process of sort of systemically and structurally removing all of those regional power bases and stuff in favor of a strong federal model. In Canada, I think in a lot of ways there's a lot of opportunity there, perhaps. I mean, I have no opinions on foreign countries and have no advice for foreigners. Because that's the last thing I want to be as an ugly American telling people who aren't American, you guys get enough of that, I'm sure. But it just seems to me like the prospect of the prairie provinces pushing back against Montreal or whatever the capital of Canada is. I'm sure it's
Ottawa.
It's Ottawa. The prairie provinces pushing back against that is, I think, powerful. And I think you're going to see more and more of that, where the libtards will want to kind of impose their order, and it'll become harder and harder to do so.
That's great, and hopefully a self-reinforcing cycle that way.
They can't even bring the they can't even bring the prime minister out west at all anymore. At least not with a massive security detail. No one wants to see him here. Like literally no one wants to see him here.
Yeah, they don't announce his visits.
Reading about the first prime minister, John A. Macdonald, he couldn't get out. He only went out west once his entire time as prime minister, but that was because of just the lack of ease of transport. Even with the train, they didn't go out west in the early days. But now it's come full circle where they don't go out west because they're so hated here now. So.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I mean, and I'm totally be willing to relocate to wherever there's a stand being taken. I could see like Canada breaking up first, and then that kind of inspiring America's breakup, though. The formal breakup versus a sort of organic, breakup where it's real but not necessarily real. And I think something we should always keep in mind in terms of like, how paradigms can shift while systems remain superficially in place. Maybe Canada 20 years from now will still be Canada. But the Western provinces and the Maritimes and the places that aren't on board with Ottawa will have the autonomy to do their own thing, and the central power will be less confident, less coordinated, and less capable of imposing its will on the periphery, and that's sort of the devolutionary theme I've been talking about.
Yeah, that seems to be the case, because even this Alberta Sovereignty Act, for example, it's not actually saying we're going to break away or anything. It doesn't show that formal breakup tendency. It just sort of signals saying, okay, Ottawa, hey, feds, we're not going to capitulate on these couple economic things here and there.
Oh, and gun control to some extent.
Yeah, that like certain things like that, but not actually breaking away. But I guess it provides the metapolitical incentive for people to pick up that mindset, that devolutionary mindset of we don't really have to be a part of the federal notion of, whether it's the actual policies themselves or whether it's just the narratives that come from Ottawa, whether through the CBC or, our own prime minister saying, oh, there's no Canadian culture. Well, if people are set on this idea that we don't have to be bought into that, then it's easy enough for Albertans to say, no, we are Albertans. We have this we have our own
Yeah.
identity, regardless of what the prime
Well,
minister says.
you've been hearing the CBC's new slogan, right, Charles? I guess no chance for Matt, but it's not who you are in Canada. No, it's not how Canadian you are. It's who you are in Canada. And I think they
Yeah,
mean
that
like it's
was
okay if you're a black woman in Canada, but I take
disgusting.
that to mean it's okay if you're a white nationalist in Canada. And so I thank the CBC for the endorsement.
Glass half full.
Yeah, I'm glad our radio station's finally behind our you know our ethno-political solutions.
I mean, that kind of leaning. That's exactly what needs to happen is embracing and extending the postmodern in our interest, right? Taking this that there is no true Canadian, or there is no obviously I know there is. I know there's authentic Americans, authentic Canadians, or whatever, but in relation to the government and how those terms and paradigms have been manipulated by the system against us, we can actually move through, move forward through these sorts of things where okay, well, all these other people are allowed to do their own thing and reject mass society in favor of Islam, or being Afro-Caribbean Canadian or whatever. We're also going to participate in that devolutionary process and try to stop us. And if it's sufficiently devolved and distributed, it makes it, it's not just for granted that they'll be able to just stop us. And that, at the very least, that's where we are at our least weak.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it, because if you disagree, NP, let me know. But I think what Matt just said there is sort of the central theme of our show. How to manifest that, how to describe it, and
I'd say it's one of them.
We yeah.
I'd say the broad central theme of this show is our accents and also Trailer Park Boys references. But aside from that, then yes, what you just
Oh
said.
yeah, we had some good ones.
Yeah, we were looking up Rickyisms earlier. There's denial and error. Anyway, sorry,
We made
Charles.
up. What did we make up? Process of elimination.
Process of lamination. I don't know.
Trial by elimination.
Trial by yeah.
Something like that.
Anyway, actually, there's another. So I had a question about your vapor trad model again while I got you here, and then we'll probably let you go. We've been taking up a lot of your time.
Well, I've enjoyed it.
Okay, well, stick around as long as you want. I already canceled plans with the girl here. Fortunately, I was going to have to eat vegetarian food.
Oh, okay, in that case, yeah.
But so with the vapor trad model, you say the next stage is the manual age, and that sounds good to me, and I agree. I see the process by which you came to that, and I can't help but agree. I had a thought though, and a worrying one. What if the manual age is like a really transient thing? What if it's always like maybe it's like always like a 1 year thing, and it's almost always immediately seized back by the military?
I mean, that's possible. That the whole looking at how I see these ages as coming about, the mechanism by which these ages come about, I don't really see the power by force as I don't see the mechanism by which the military can control us. Okay, if they could, they would. And the modern military, and that's the thing about these ages, is the elites and their institutions from the other ages don't go away or dissolve. They become kind of locked against each other in these sort of stable arrangements where they cancel each other out. And
Right,
that's,
like we just saw the monarchists in Germany get in trouble with the new managers.
Right. So I just don't. I mean, to some extent, you could see that with like, in Mexico, you have the cartels and stuff, and you have the failed state. So even if there were a sort of a dissolution of the institutions upon which the manual age exists, I think it would be a very different kind of martial, more like, you would have like a bunch of hillbillies in the back of a pickup truck, with
You know what? How
off the
about
shelf.
the South African private security?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of private security contractors, a lot of kind of like roving bands of dudes, extracting, tribute and stuff. I suppose could be part of the part of the process, but I think uh, generally speaking, the locus of authority and control will devolve down to sort of like the organic community leader level, right?
Yeah. I was trying to think of like examples in history, and anyone who listened to the last show, if they listened past the interview, would have heard me musing on this. But I remember there's a Thailand kingdom where they ended up with making mostly like temples and stuff. I can think of the German farmers of the, well, I think before the Holy Wars, the farmers got just supremely rich and were in charge, almost, despite it still being a monarchy. It's hard to think of too many manual ages, though. When they were, like, if archaeology is the defining thing, then where maybe Egypt was when they were building the pyramids? Is that a possibility?
I think that would be more kind of managerial, or martial managerial kind of ancient regime.
Oh, yeah, they did
kind
have
of,
a
state arrangement.
massive administration at the time. That's true.
Yeah. I think in a lot of ways, the technology and the abundance hasn't been there, for, because I mean, you know, why do you answer to authority? Well, in the past, you've had to participate in the system to feed yourself, and support yourself. And you've had to participate vigorously. You've had to relocate. You had to work very hard. You had to have a Protestant work ethic to succeed, and on and on and on. And the sort of post-scarcity world that we're moving into, thanks to these technological processes brought about by the mercantile age, um, are making it to where, like, one thing I think is going to be big that no one's talking about, and this is really getting out. I apologize to the audience for this, but I want to just um, uh, why isn't anybody talking about like Roomba? Um, um, Robot gardening. Okay, it seems like all the pieces are in place or close to being in place, to where you could just turn your entire yard with little like rolling robot things into a permacultural garden without any effort or skill. And it would just, it would just do the monitoring, it would do the planting, it would do
Oh,
the
I know
harvesting.
exactly why people aren't talking about that. It's because food's still very extremely cheap due to industrial agriculture. But if things keep breaking down or shifting, then yeah, that you're exactly right. That will be. Ooh, that's a great idea for a series of inventions. You could probably get government grants for it too.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't even have to be someone that wants food. I mean, it just people who like to have nice gardens. Like
Yeah,
there's some people have, you need extensive skills to have a really nice garden. And it takes a big time investment.
Weeding is one of the
But I'm
biggest
sure there's
jobs, and that
plenty.
one we could knock off right away with a Roomba like robot.
Yeah, well, and like just, even just a rose garden, right? Decorative garden. If you could just have one with a access granted to you by those robots, then I'm sure there's plenty of people that would be all in.
Hmm.
yeah. But yeah, you're absolutely right about how like industrial agriculture, agribusiness have made it to where we, I can certainly say in my case I have more food than I really should, um, and I'm not all that wealthy. but I'm certainly wealthy enough to afford all the food I want, and then some. So I, because of that post-scarcity context, there's less pressure on me to submit to authority, to these traditional authorities, and to the mass society that these authorities are entangled with, right? And that's kind of what I see the manual age is representing, where in the mercantile age, money was the cardinal indicator of status, right? It was the whoever has the most money has the most power, because in a mercantile society, money is power, and people are confused because we're moving away from that. You see this with like boomers trying to give Zoomers dating advice. It's like, well, get a good job. If you have enough money and a nice car, you're going to pick up chicks.
Yeah.
And that's not good advice. In a post-scarcity context, being some dork, who works hard and cares about his car, it doesn't prefer you advantages in the dating scene.
In my industry, there are like the most common kind of guy is a 35-year-old dork with a really nice car that he likes to spend his time on in the garage in the weekend, and a Filipino girlfriend he had to go order overseas for because girls won't look at him twice here.
Yeah, and it's kind of this cargo culting where he's playing by the rules of an order that no longer exists. Where he's obviously he's got a good job that he's been at for over 13 years. He's got this good mortgage. He's got this good car. Where are the bitches? Why do I have to mail order them? From Thailand or whatever. And that process of money mattering less to people. I think a key aspect of our cultural transformation.
Yeah, people care more. People seem to care more about you could even say the social media clout that you have. Just being some figure online. You don't have to be that interesting. Just entertaining online. That seems to hold more sway than most things these days.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have social proof within your neo-tribal clique? And if you do, then you'll probably have a better time than if you had a sports car.
It's actually really funny how little they care what your neo-tribal clique is, just that you're good in it.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the nature.
I said on a previous podcast, any young guys, I'm not saying you're the next Fuhrer, but if you want to pretend to be on a date, I'll back you up.
Yeah, we men need to be always working together to trick women into thinking we're high status. That's very important. It's the first thing you need to do for your bros.
Mm-hmm.
Every man a king. We can make it happen now.
NP is huge on the dark web. My goodness.
I'm one of the top five. I'm one of the top five Mustache Man fans in Edmonton.
Yeah. It could be anything. But yeah, I mean that's sort of the devolution of because in the 20th century model you had this unified, like everybody was competing to be the rock star or the millionaire, and all these it's actually if you know how to play the new game, it's very winnable. What were you saying? Math core metal. If your math core metal SoundCloud, has a lot of clout within the math core metal scene, then you're perceived as a winner, and you're certainly a bigger winner than some, guy who works hard and has the traditional 20th century indicators of status.
There's another factor there too. When you actually work hard, they make you travel pretty much incessantly as a young man. Like I can't find a job with my trade or whatever where I'm not traveling 70% of the time.
Right.
And then, so you're either getting hookers in a hotel room, or you're meeting girls on Tinder for one day, or whatever. The only place you're not is home.
Right. Right.
I don't do either of those things, incidentally. I'm not endorsing those things. I'm just saying if I wanted to get laid while I'm working, that would be how I'd have to do it.
Yeah, well, boomers don't get these changing processes are going to continue giving the bad advice that they're giving about, play the game by the rules. You'll collect $200 every time you pass go, and if you just keep buying up the properties and putting hotels on them, you'll win the game. And that's not the game anymore. But they can't learn, or they refuse to learn. They don't care, and I understand. Once you're married, the urgency of like the modern dating and mating scene just doesn't have the same relevance to you, and you just kind of assume everything's the same way it was when you were there.
Yeah, and we were kind of talking about this last episode, or the last two episodes, about this changing landscape brought about by the internet, specifically social media, and you can kind of think of yourself as this, settler. You're the first on this new terrain of the internet, and learning how to set up your colony or just navigate the land. And so it's entirely new territory, and the boomers, they're not in that context. Like they're back home in Europe, and we're out there and trying to navigate this new land now. So
Yep.
It's an entirely different context. They're not interested
It's bursting with possibilities.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, it's bursting with possibilities. And the dissident right is, in a lot of ways, pioneering this space that everyone else is also showing up at behind us. So often in the movement, there's like this, touch grass, stop being so online. It's like, actually, push through the online so hard that you make it real. If you online hard enough, you can have a real girlfriend, rather than doing this dorky stuff where you try to date local girls or whatever. That you have nothing in common with and don't relate with at all. That's not your real community.
Yeah. Basically, actually, if I ban you from my group chat, you're never going to get laid. I just want everyone to know that. So try and mind your manners a little bit more.
Yep.
They got to use that the new social clout as leverage against your enemies.
Well, I think we've covered a lot. I definitely, if anybody has any follow-up questions, because we've covered a lot of territory and made a lot of bold statements, I think I'd like to hear some, skeptical pushback before venturing further off into this wilderness. What haven't we covered here in terms? I think that the big thing is an optimistic perspective on technology and progress as things that the world is changing in ways that actually benefit identitarians, that actually benefit traditionalists. It's easier than ever to do your own thing, and we should be leaning into that. Rejecting the modern world in a forward direction, right?
100% agree. Charles, any final things?
Nah, I think we got through everything I could possibly have thought of. So yeah, that was awesome.
Matt, when's the next episode of Radio Free Indiana? And is there anything else you'd like to plug?
That's pretty much it. Birdman.substack.com, on Telegram, BirdmanChan.
Links down below.
On the Birdman Chan at 9 in the morning tomorrow morning, I'll have another show. I'm trying to have them most mornings, but my personal situation means that I'll have them sometimes and sometimes I won't, and everybody's gonna have to deal with that.
Okay, I want to see your cat alive and healthy on that tomorrow morning.
Okay, I will confirm that. Yeah, the cat is in great shape. He bit me. It was a love bite, but they're hard love bites. No, I'm very good to my cat. I'll prove it tomorrow.
Okay, yeah. Buy it some fancy feast, or the audience will be mad at you, I'm sure. If there's one thing that everyone on the internet can actually agree on, is that we really like cats. That like transcends all ideology and everything else. Well, goodbye. Everyone like, share, subscribe. See you next time.
Yep. Thank you, gentlemen. Yep.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Matt. See you.